My name is Henry, and I'm 17 years old. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Maplewood, a small town where nothing exciting ever happens. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me alone in our two-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was Friday night, and after a marathon of horror movies, I started to get hungry. I didn't feel like cooking, so I decided to order a pizza. Tony's Pizza, the local spot, had the best late-night delivery in town. I ordered a large pepperoni, paid online, and settled back on the couch. The delivery was supposed to take about 30 minutes, so I resumed my movie marathon, losing myself in the suspenseful scenes. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I paused the movie, surprised that the pizza had arrived so quickly. I glanced at the clock, 10:45 p.m. The delivery guy must have been ahead of schedule. I walked to the front door, peeking through the peephole. A man stood on the other side holding a pizza box. He wore a red cap, a jacket with the Tony's Pizza logo, and had a wide, unsettling grin. Something about the grin made me hesitate. It looked forced, almost predatory. My stomach twisted in discomfort, but I shook it off. I told myself I was just being paranoid after watching too many horror movies. It was just a pizza delivery guy after all. I unlocked the door and opened it slightly, keeping the chain on. "Pizza for Henry?" the man asked in a cheerful tone that seemed a little too high-pitched. "Yeah, thanks," I said, sliding my hand through the gap to pay him. He handed me the pizza box, but instead of stepping back like most delivery people do, he stood there, staring at me with that same eerie grin. His eyes were too wide, like he was trying too hard to be friendly. Thanks again," I said, starting to close the door. "Wait," he said abruptly, his hand reaching out to stop the door. My heart jumped as I felt his fingers brush against the wood. "It's cold out here. Mind if I come in for a second? Just to warm up?" Every instinct in my body screamed at me to shut the door, but I was too startled to move. His grin never faltered, but there was something in his eyes that made my skin crawl. "I know, sorry. My parents wouldn't like that." For a split second, the man's smile faltered, and his eyes darkened. But then, just as quickly, the smile returned. Of course. Sorry for asking. You have a good night now." I nodded, closed the door, and quickly locked it. My hands were shaking as I set the pizza down on the table. I stood there for a moment, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. The man's face kept flashing in my mind, those two wide eyes, that unsettling grin. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird delivery guy, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I decided to distract myself with some food, but as I opened the pizza box, I froze. Inside the box, there was no pizza. Instead, there was a note scrawled in messy handwriting, "Let me in." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the note, my mind racing. This had to be a joke, a sick, twisted joke. I slammed the box shut, backing away from it as if it might bite me. I grabbed my phone and called Tony's Pizza, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number. "Tony's Pizza, how can I help you?" A friendly voice answered. "Hi, I just had a pizza delivered, and there's a note in the box instead of pizza. This isn't funny. Who did you send to my house?" I blurted out, my voice shaky. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "We haven't made any deliveries to your address tonight, ma'am," the woman said slowly. My blood ran cold. "What? No, that's not possible. Are you sure you ordered from us?" the woman asked, her tone concerned. I looked at my phone's order history. The app showed the order was confirmed, but now, as I looked closer, the details were wrong. The delivery address was correct, but the restaurant name was just a string of random letters. My heart sank as I realized I had been scammed. I'm sorry. Never mind," I stammered before hanging up. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Who had I just let come to my house? I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That a creepy guy delivered an empty pizza box? I turned to head upstairs, but then I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible knock at the door. I froze in place, listening. The knock came again, a little louder this time. I slowly turned my head toward the door, dread pooling in my stomach. The knock came a third, followed by a voice, soft and sinister. "Let me in." My breath caught in my throat. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as I slowly backed away from the door. The voice repeated, a little more insistent this time. "Let me in." I bolted up the stairs, slamming my bedroom door behind me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The operator picked up, But before I could say anything, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I choked back a scream, clutching the phone to my ear. "Please, there's someone outside my house. They're trying to get in." "Stay on the line, we're sending someone now," the operator said, her voice calm and steady. I heard the knocking again, but this time it was coming from inside the house. I dropped the phone, my blood turning to ice. The knocks were slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I stared at the door, too terrified to move. "Let me in." The voice was right outside my door now, barely a whisper. The doorknob began to turn, and I backed up against the wall, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The door creaked open, and I saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. I screamed, but no sound came out. The figure stepped forward, and I realized with a sickening dread that it was the same man from the front door. His grin was gone, replaced by a look of pure malice. "Let me in," he whispered, taking another step toward me. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the worst, but then I heard sirens in the distance. The man froze, his head snapping toward the window. The sound of approaching police cars grew louder, and the man turned and fled down the stairs. I collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The police arrived minutes later, finding me huddled in the corner of my room. They searched the house, but the man was gone. All they found was the empty pizza box and the note inside. The officers checked the security cameras in my neighborhood, but the footage only showed the man approaching my house, never leaving. His face was obscured, making identification impossible. The police assured me that they would keep a close watch on the area, but the man was never found. I never stayed home alone again after that night. The memory of those wide, predatory eyes and that sinister grin haunted me for years. I never found out who the man was or how he knew where I lived. But one thing was certain, I would never forget the night I almost let him in. My name is Liam, and I was 16 when this happened. I live in a small town called Oak Ridge, where everyone knows each other, and nothing out of the ordinary ever seems to happen. My parents were out for the evening, leaving me alone in our old, creaky house at the edge of the woods. It was a typical Saturday night, and I was looking forward to some quiet time with my video games. It was around 9 p.m. when the first strange thing happened. I was sitting on the couch, immersed in a game, when I heard a faint noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling the leaves outside. But then I realized it was coming from inside the house. It was a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, like someone was talking just out of earshot. I paused the game and listened closely, but the whispering stopped. I shrugged it off as my imagination, the result of too much screen time. I went back to my game, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. About half an hour later, I heard it again. This time it was clearer, distinct, though I couldn't make out the words. The whispers seemed to be coming from upstairs, in the direction of my bedroom. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just the old house settling, but my curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and slowly made my way up the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound echoing in the silent house. The whispering grew louder as I approached my room, sending a shiver through me. I reached the door and paused, my hand on the doorknob, listening to the low murmur on the other side. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was empty, just as I had left it, but the whispers continued, now seeming to come from all around me. I spun in a circle, shining the flashlight into every corner, but there was nothing there. The whispers stopped suddenly, as if they had been cut off, leaving the room in an eerie silence. I backed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain what was happening, but I knew I didn't want to stay in that room any longer. As I turned to head back downstairs, I noticed something strange. A shadow, darker than the others, lingered in the hallway. The shadow was shaped like a person, but there was no one there to cast it. It stood perfectly still, as if it were watching me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The flashlight flickered in my hand, the beam of light trembling as I tried to keep it steady. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel its presence, cold and menacing. I took a step back, and the shadow seemed to inch closer. Panic surged through me, and I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. I ran to the living room, grabbed my phone, and called my parents. My mom picked up after a few rings, her voice calm and reassuring. Liam, what's wrong? She asked, hearing the panic in my voice. Mom, there's something in the house, I whispered, my eyes darting around the room. I heard whispering, and there's a shadow upstairs, but no one's there. Liam, calm down, she said gently. It's probably just your imagination. You know how that old house can play tricks on you. I swear it's not my imagination, Mom, I insisted. Something's not right. All right, we'll be home soon, she said, her voice steadying me. Just stay downstairs, and don't worry. We'll check everything when we get back. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and hung up. I decided to wait in the living room, where I could see the front door. I kept all the lights on and tried to distract myself with TV, but I couldn't focus. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept glancing at the stairs, expecting to see that shadow again. Time seemed to drag on forever, but finally, I heard the familiar sound of my parents' car pulling into the driveway. Relief washed over me, and I rushed to the door to greet them. My dad noticed the tension in my face and immediately began searching the house, while my mom stayed with me, trying to calm my nerves. My dad went upstairs to check my room in the hallway. I stayed at the bottom of the stairs, anxiously waiting for him to come back. After a few minutes, he returned, a puzzled look on his face. There's nothing up there, Liam, he said. No sign of anything unusual. Are you sure you weren't dreaming or something? I wasn't dreaming, I insisted, though doubt began to creep in. It all felt so real, but there was nothing to show for it. Let's check the security footage, my mom suggested, trying to ease my mind. We headed to the living room, where my dad pulled up the footage from the cameras we had installed around the house. We watched the recordings from the time I first heard the whispering until my parents came home. The cameras showed nothing out of the ordinary, just me moving through the house, alone. No shadows, no strange movements, no signs of anyone else being there. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How could that be? I knew what I had seen, what I had heard, but the evidence said otherwise. There was nothing there. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of what happened that night. My parents brushed it off as a vivid imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in the house with me. Something that left no trace, no evidence, only the lingering fear that it might return. I never heard the whispers again, and the shadow never reappeared. But every time I'm home alone, I can't help but feel like I'm being watched, like something is waiting just out of sight. The memory of that night still haunts me, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones that leave no trace behind. It was a quiet Saturday night, and I was finally alone in the house. My parents had gone out for a weekend getaway, leaving me in charge. At 17, I was old enough to handle being home alone, and I was looking forward to a peaceful night of reading in my room. The house was eerily silent, without the usual background noise of my parents. The ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards seemed louder, almost amplified by the stillness. I was curled up in my bed, lost in the pages of a mystery novel, when I heard it, a soft knock at the front door. It was so faint that I almost thought I'd imagined it. I paused, listening intently, but all I could hear was the distant hum of the refrigerator. After a few moments, I shook my head and returned to my book, convincing myself it was just the house settling. But then it came again, a little louder this time. A definite knock. I hesitated, my heart beating a little faster. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late. Who could be at the door? I decided to ignore it, hoping that whoever it was would just go away. But the knocking continued, growing more insistent with each passing second. Reluctantly, I put my book aside and slid out of bed. The hallway leading to the front door seemed longer than usual, the shadows cast by the dim light stretching out in strange, unnatural shapes. My nerves were on edge as I approached the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No response, just the sound of my own breathing. I glanced through the peephole, but all I could see was darkness. The porch light was off, and there was no sign of anyone outside. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice a little louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to turn away when a sudden chill ran down my spine. Something didn't feel right. Every instinct told me not to open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked it and opened it just a crack. The night air was cold against my skin, and the darkness seemed to press in on me. I couldn't see anyone, but the feeling that someone was out there lingered. I stepped outside, peering into the night, but the street was deserted. No cars, no people, nothing. I quickly retreated inside, locking the door behind me. My heart was still racing as I leaned against the door, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. I pulled it out of my pocket, expecting a text from one of my friends. Instead, it was from an unknown number. "Did you hear that?" A cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the message. Who was this? And how did they know about the knocking? I typed back a quick response, "Who is this?" No reply. I waited, my eyes glued to the phone, but the screen remained blank. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was just a prank, some jerk trying to mess with me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Just as I was about to head back to my room, there was another knock at the door. This time it was louder, more forceful. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly approached the door again, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't bother looking through the peephole this time. I just stood there, staring at the door, my hand trembling as it hovered over the doorknob. The doorbell rang, the sound sharp and jarring in the silence of the house. I jumped, my nerves frayed. I didn't want to open the door, but something compelled me to do it. Maybe it was the need to confront whatever was out there, to prove to myself that I wasn't scared. I opened the door wide, ready to face whoever or whatever was on the other side. But there was no one there, just an empty porch and the cold night air. I was about to step outside when I noticed something on the doorstep, a small, unmarked envelope. My hands shook as I bent down to pick it up. The paper was cold to the touch, like it had been left out in the night for hours. I brought it inside, closing the door and locking it behind me. I tore open the envelope, my heart racing. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. I unfolded it, my breath catching in my throat. Scrawled in red ink were 3 words, "I'm inside now." Panic surged through me as I dropped the note, my eyes darting around the room. The house was still, too still. My mind raced as I tried to remember if I had locked all the doors and windows. Had someone slipped inside while I was distracted? A loud crash echoed from the back of the house, shattering the silence. My blood ran cold as I realized someone, or something, was inside. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted for the front door, flinging it open and sprinting outside. My only thought was to get away, to escape whatever had entered my house. I didn't stop running until I reached a neighbor's house, banging on the door until they let me in. The police arrived shortly after, but they didn't find anyone inside my house. The note and the envelope were gone, as if they'd never existed. I never found out who was knocking at my door that night, or who, or what, had left that note. But I know one thing for sure: I'll never stay home alone again.